Okay, well, since we've hit two, and this talk is being recorded, I guess we will begin now. So, kia ora koutou. Hi everybody, my name is Bree and I am from the New Zealand Portrait Gallery, and I am very happy to welcome you all to our first ever Zoom public program with level 2. So we've made a decision that it's safer for everybody in their whānau to have these really interesting talks and discussions online. So we are very excited to have Holly here today to speak to her artistic practice. This particular session is going to be recorded and then uploaded to our YouTube sometime afterwards. So if you want to rewatch or you've got anybody who wasn't able to make it today, you'll find this recording available online. And yeah, so we've also got Gina Matchett, our curator of Autonomous Bodies here. And we'll just be having a bit of a korero. Polly will speak to her work first, and then towards the end we can take any questions which you can pop in the chat, or if you want to ask directly, I think you can signal by putting your hand up, which is an option in Zoom, or just pop in the chat and we can unmute you and you can ask Holly your questions about her practice. But yes, so I'll mute my mic and Holly, take it away.
Thank you. Kia ora everyone. Thank you for showing up to my artist talk. It's very flattering to see that everyone actually came through for me, and I'm a little bit nervous but excited. I guess, should I just dive into what's been going on in the exhibition and my practice and everything? So basically I've had like the privilege and just exciting opportunity given to me by Gina to show in the gallery with literally artists I've been inspired by and watched and just admired for a lot of my own creative practice. So to be in that space is just incredibly humbling and really sacred to me. So kia ora, Gina. Yeah, I guess if we could go to maybe the first slide of works and I'll begin talking about that. So these two images are photographs I made with my partner Nate, who's also in here. And I guess for me, I'll just speak about the process of creating these works, because process is kind of intrinsic and if not a huge reason in why I create. Basically, as I think a lot about modi and energy and how objects have the power and the personality to kind of tell us their story if we are open to listening to that. During this time when I found this beautiful tree stump, which we still don't know what type of wood it is yet, but we'll figure it out eventually. I've got a friend who's going to investigate it for me. When I found that, it was really through a time of me considering ideas around being at an in-between, not quite understanding my Pākehā identity and the whakapapa of how I got here, as that's been a really disjointed or non-existent to some degree korero in my whānau. So in my practice, a lot of it is centered around beginning here in this body and understanding what Pākehā identity looks like for me right now today, and how I've come to be living in this post-colonial, current colonial climate of New Zealand and Aotearoa. So when I found this log, it perfectly kind of, I looked at it and felt pieces of myself reflected. I wondered where it had been, how it had uprooted itself, how did it drift through an ocean in between of like unknown and arrive here on this whenua without that history, and just the tension of knowing that Tangaroa could take it back away. Just like, I loved it. I fell in love with it and honestly had like quite a like romantic kinship, and just like I needed to go visit it and like worried that it would go, and like these images are not usually how we would shoot things, or like I would shoot things, but I was in such a we need to catch this. We need to catch this moment. Nate, what camera do you have? Do you have any cameras that have film in them? And Nate's like, yeah, one, I think it's black and white. So that's kind of the reason these images look like this, because they were of a moment, really, and an urgency to capture them. But yeah, it is a chance. And I think a lot of the time I found trouble in my art practice, well, not trouble, but just kind of like rational critique around that kind of art making not being a formal practice or something, because like it is by chance and it is by nature that this happened. I happened to see it, but for me, it is the process, like letting the environment kind of speak just as loud with its agency, and me being able to work with that in a collaborative kind of relationship where it's like I'm my own and the environment is its own, and we are these separate things working together with just as much, what do you even call that, almost like personhood or just autonomy, I guess is the perfect word in this scene. But yeah. And Gina, is it okay to ask you now why you liked that mahi?
Kia ora koutou. Ko Gina Matcha taku ingoa. Yeah, Holly's work really spoke to me because it, like I say, is really on the edge of, I think, these really uncomfortable conversations that we need to be having in Aotearoa now. They're sort of veiled, they're sort of underground, and Holly seems to confront them head on. And then also with this work, yeah, it was really the way she interacts and places herself in these settings in a really kind of vulnerable way, and interacts with the environment and with the whenua. And this one particularly was, again, really amazing because how often do you see a massive tree stump kind of like dumped on the beach by the sea? So again, Holly took this opportunity to speak to this this rākau, yeah, where it's come from, we don't know. And yeah, that's, well, one of the reasons why her work is, for me, conceptually and politically, it's really pushing this uncomfortableness, but it's also really beautiful and really personal as well. So yeah, that's my take on it for now.
Maybe Brie, if you could go to the next slide. And the next slide. Because this image here is one that's not included in the exhibition, but I thought I should add it in because it just, like, the scale of the tree and just almost the absurdity of something like that landing on the whenua upright, like almost as like I'm pretending to belong here, but clearly it's not rooted in the land there. That image kind of captures that for me and kind of pins together that story as well. But yeah, it's very much also, I just wanted to mention while you're saying, Gina, like these ideas of power and submission with working in the environment to some degree is like, you know, there's like, I think often people, especially in art, subject objects and women to passive things creating a picture. Whereas in these images, I really wanted to create or balance, I guess, the energy and my autonomy and being there as a nude body, as a female body in the landscape, and also have this giant tree stump possessing its own kind of story, which is like intrinsically tied to these questions and, I don't know, existentialism surrounding whakapapa and not belonging or belonging. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that little part.
I have a question actually. So yeah. When it came to taking these images and actually placing yourself in such a vulnerable position of being nude in this environment, kind of, do you have a personal process that led to those I guess that led to that decision to um, exhibit your own body in that way. But then also kind of how do you approach that and feel safe and comfortable in that environment as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a question I've come across a lot. And frankly, every time I feel like my answers change. But for me, being nude in my performance practice feels like me. It feels like me. It feels like it just is what it is. And then the context of a woman's body and sexualization and the absurdity is then opposed by the viewer, usually. And in some ways, like I know that like the feminine body can be seen as vulnerable and passive, but to kind of not understand my body as that and shift like fine, you can look at my body and have those kind of sexualized or like ideas around it, but for that not to be on me is a very empowering experience. Like, you know, like I'm not existing in this body feeling like a woman or like titties or anything. I feel just like this like flesh body doing like this like insect. At this time I'm like, I don't know what I am. I'm just crawling along these rocks with a body not quite fit to like be in this environment. So it's all very like present and visceral, I guess. Yeah, in this actual kind of taking these images, because like it is a public space. Anyone could be anywhere. I could be seen. Like I view, like I know it's 2021, but like I believe that being nude and being a woman in the environment or outside of a private setting is a political act and an act of resistance. And like I love doing, like it's not the center of my mahi, but like just by being there and for a moment being able to indulge in like my performance piece and my artwork and the body that I want, and you know, in the image I want to make, like that's why I do it, I guess, because this, you know, the whenua is here in its body and like I want to be there too. And just like the symmetry of the feminine body or like any body really, it's just like it looks beautiful in the environment to me. So yeah, I guess is that a good answer?
Yeah, definitely. I guess a follow-up question for me was that so you stumbled across this particular remnant of a tree. Did you then immediately go, okay, I absolutely have to, or did you also, sorry, like take those photos in that exact moment, but did you also return to it other times and take additional photos or?
Um, so I definitely had like when I first saw it, I was in a situation where I couldn't go get it. I was just in a car with a person I don't know very well, and like I saw it. It was like this gleaming silver beacon, and I was like, honestly, like a fairy tale. I was like, it can't be. Like, what is that truly there? And I just was like thinking about it. I think I must have messaged Nate or something, but went back to it and then brought Nate back to it again to then take the photos. So the only documentation I have of this is a few kind of like test photos on an iPhone to be like, is this the image we're going to take on this limited film we have? And then those film images that are there. And then post that, I think I was so caught up in this like relationship with, I don't know, just my thinking, the conceptual kind of like, how am I going to use this? Like I've been like, the earth has like given me this gift essentially, you know, and like how am I going to reciprocate that in like my art practice and actually like tell a story here? So like I was very connected to it. Just I'll still go back. It's still there even after the big storm a few months ago. It was still there, and like now a lot of my whānau know about my relations. So like I hear about it now, you know, like, oh, I actually saw it, and like yeah, it was really intimate relationship, and I haven't seen it for a while though. I haven't been down there in a minute, but I'm more at peace now with the idea of it potentially leaving or people going down and chopping it up for firewood. Ignorance is bliss. I don't want to look at that.
And I guess that's like the really incredible um, connection that you bring into your mahi, is that you approach this from a very political, quite feminist sense of autonomy, but then it is so innately connected to this idea of the whenua, but then navigating that through like your Pakeha identity, which,
Mm,
as Gina mentioned, like there is so much nuance to that, and it's quite a huge concept to be developing within these sorts of images. And yeah, I wonder if maybe we wanted to speak to that sense of Pakeha-ness, or the environment, I guess, with our
mm.
next image. If you want to, do we want to move on to the
Yeah.
video? Now I'm going to show the video work that we've got in Autonomous Bodies next. It does have audio to it. I'm going to mute the audio if I can. So there's that. That's not overwhelming. So sorry if I have a little bit of technical difficulties for a second.
You're doing great. Well done. Should I call it all as playing, you reckon? Okay, then. So this is a work that I made in 2 parts, actually. Now that I look back on it, it was quite a process. So, and then I've remade it again for this exhibition with Gina at the Portrait Gallery. But yeah, so it's a long time ago to think about like putting myself right back into that position that I was in, because frankly, when I made this, I was quite angry. I was right in the belly of the beast. You know what I mean? Like the rupture was about to happen. I was like reading all this like literature about Pākehā identity, Pākehā ideas of Pākehā identity, colonial identity, and all these types of things, and just like embarrassingly loud was the absence of te ao Māori, mātauranga, or just like an acknowledgement that, you know, without Māori, there's not Pākehā. And like that just kind of spoke to me, and like, I guess in a like feminist context, or like an eco feminist context to some degree, but like in a way of like we're removing history here, and we're taking names away from places and people, and like literally reality, as like most of us understand that like that is like a basic tactic of imperialism and colonization, is to change the name and forget it. So in this mahi here, it was very much about seeing, as we know, red rocks, and I later found out is called Parewhiro, and understanding that I didn't understand the whakapapa or that site, or hadn't even tried to learn, I guess, any of that until I started thinking this way, until I started thinking about how empty the name Pākehā and what Pākehā meant was, because we don't investigate this and we don't critically look at where this identity came from. And what something I think I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing is trying to understand, develop how this identity is going to exist in the future as partners of Te Tiriti, and like as an identity that we can stand in as Pākehā and be like, I'm Pākehā, and it be a sense of pride, not a sense of awkwardness and shame and like shallow guilt. So this mahi was really about like in that energy, and like that's a lot of energy, I guess, for like it's heaps, because like it can like break your heart. Like I found myself like feeling this like frustration and like anger at my parents, like why don't I know where I'm from, or like why don't I know anyone or anything about like this mysterious motherland, and like, well, I also don't know anything really about like te ao Māori and like these sites. So the line that's being drawn up the ocean is made of salt, and I love working with salt in a lot of my practice, because I see it as kind of this like sacred substance. It's like used in rituals, it's in the sea, it's in our tears. It's kind of this like binding, organic, you know, and it stings and dissolve. Like it, you know, I can go over the like how salt works, but yeah. So I was drawing out a line from the ocean and kind of imagining that this line is like my ancestors' arrival from the sea. And as I'm drawing the line, Tangaroa is just by nature washing it away, taking it away. And I kind of get to the end of the line and sit there and look back. And it was a very like polarizing moment in performance when I got to the end of the line and kind of looked at this maunga here that you can see on the screen now, and then looked back to this like vast ocean and felt that real sense of like I'm in between again. I don't know where I've come from or where I'm going. So that was kind of the metaphor, I guess, behind that mahi, whilst also trying to like keep it contemporary, keep it arty. I know that's kind of patronizing to say, but to be like, I'm going to use this work as a vessel to like actually teach people that this area is called Parewhiro, and I'm going to throw in like the stories I've heard about the whakapapa of this place, because like, you know, like why not? Like I can't explore my Pākehā identity again without acknowledging what's already here. You know, I can't begin to walk up this land without knowing the truth. And I think that in itself is something that I haven't seen reflected in many Pākehā art practice. And like I can understand that like I might not fit the bill or look pretty, or like I'm anxious, I'm nervous. What if I'm appropriating Maori stories or something? And like I understand those things, but at the same time, I can't, like, who am I to rewrite a story, make an artwork on a site again, when that's like quite literally what like Pākehā and like my whakapapa have done, is rewrite and change the context of places. And it's very much of my belief that we have to go backwards back to the beginning and like really look at this stuff, because it does teach you how to go forward. And that's, yeah, kind of where this work had me, I guess. And it's just also like, it's an amazing landscape we have right there, just, and you forget, because like, I guess this is a good point to talk about that also this whole area was a quarry site. So the maunga here, like the reason we can see the streaks through it is because it's been quarried for different minerals and sold. So it doesn't look like how it used to look like. And like that again is kind of playing into the narrative of the Pākehā imposition on land, changing stories, to the point where like in a lot of areas we can't recognize the land that stories and whakaaro are written about now, you know? So yeah, is that good? Any questions?
I also really liked, I think in the little write-up that we had next to this video work at the gallery, there was this moment that just has always stuck with me. I can't remember the wording of it, but you're saying how you almost like emotionally connected your body to the whenua itself, almost like that sense of the scarring of the environment is like the scarring of almost, I guess, Papatūānuku, you know, her own sense of loss. And I found that really beautiful and quite a difficult thing to come to terms with. And I think that's where your interaction with both that kind of feminist role of the body and autonomy, which is what this exhibition, Autonomous Bodies, is so centered on. And then like the Pākehā aspect of it, but then connecting that back to the whenua itself, which it's just incredible. And I really love all these different aspects coming through, and that idea of the female body and these things that we go through but then also that idea of the whenua itself, and how well that connects back to this exhibition. I wonder if, Gina, you had any comments on how well that kind of overlaps.
Yeah, I think again, that when Holly was talking about the first works, that how she's saying about how, you know, her nude body in the landscape is a political act, and you know that's true, but and that's the reason why I've chosen her work as well as the other works in the exhibition, where the artists are female, they are in command of how, particularly if they're in the works, how they are portrayed in the works. It's not a male artist or being directed by a male or someone outside it. These women, wahine, transgender, non-binary artists, are in control. And yeah, and I think the other interesting, right throughout the show, but and really strongly, obviously, in Holly's work, but I think also, you know, the way that Holly approaches, you know, this very kind of deep and fraught subject. You know, it's really interesting because, you know, Holly, you're really pushing it, but in a really sensitive way. I think you're not, because I know I'm very wary of. I really call out appropriation. You know, if there's non-Māori artists using Māori, you know, designs or any, and there are still quite a few artists who do appropriate. So I'm very aware of, you know, when someone says, oh, but you know, if they're not Māori and they're doing this, then, you know, but like I say, with the way that Holly approaches her mahi, it's very well thought out, it's very well researched, it's very, you know, there's in no way is Holly appropriating anything. She's just trying to navigate this sort of in-between world. And like I say, we're going to have to do more of this as time goes on, and these conversations will become more become more normalized, or people will figure things out a lot more. But at the moment, I still think it's, particularly for older generations, not so much for the younger generation, but that simply that, yeah, Pākehā identity is very complicated and very fraught and seen as negative. Yeah
I've definitely found that, like, the critique of my works from Pākehā is always kind of not necessarily, you know, not very helpful. Like, it's really stuck in its ways, and like a real kind of like guiding principle of my mahi is like, you know, the whenua and the body of the earth. If like I can understand that, like, in terms of, you know, the reality of this body, then like it's, I don't know how to quite say it, but like working in an exchange with the environment, I'm not going to like take anything or rewrite stories, but like if we understand, and like in Mātauranga, like understanding Papa Tōnuku and learning that like the treatment of the environment is so similar to the way we treat women under capitalism. I was having a great kōrero with my flatmate Pounamu about this morning, just how like we understand, or like we know as like people other than the white man, like we can understand the way in which there is so much symmetry between like the physical kind of environment and like the taking from it, the changing of it, the way we like breastfeed from her as if she's an endless resource, like without that exchange. So like I found that in my own practice, this kind of, I guess like in some ways I've seen Pākehā be quite anxious about like acknowledging Te Ao Māori or using, you know, holding Te Reo and saying like acknowledging the land here as Papa Tōnuku. Like, I don't really have that anxiety because that culture and those ideas are a reality for me. Like, it's very real, and like I'm here and this is the tikanga of this land. So like, you know, it doesn't feel like any appropriation or anything, but like I will say that like that learning and that transformation of thinking needs to happen so thoughtfully and slowly, because I've seen often like it kind of jumped into quite quickly, and then that's when you get kind of into the territory of like you're actually subjecting Māori or land or Māori ways of being as like, you know, to Pākehā scrutiny or to aid Pākehā understanding themselves. And it's like, no, we need to look at ourselves. Like, this isn't, the Pākehā crisis isn't a Māori problem. And like, again, just like the idea of like the abuse of like resource and people and whenua, like rather than looking at the body, is something that I'm always thinking of in my work, I guess, because